Okay, hi, that's a bit loud. Hi, welcome back for the last talk of the Neuro Days. Then we have a roundtable at 4:30, but for now it's the last talk with our last speaker. So we are honored to welcome Caroline Strube, who is a member of the CNRS Integrity Office since 2019. She obtained her PhD in 1993, and then she worked for 15 years as a CNRS neuroscientific researcher, where she studied excitation, contraction of the coupling mechanism in skeletal muscles. And then she decided to promote research ethics and integrity, and she was referent of this for the Aix-Marseille University Doctoral College until a few years ago. And now she studies fraud allegations in biology for the CNRS, and she's spreading awareness on ethics and integrity in research. So today we're going to review some history of fraud and see what led people to do this and how it impacts their environment and society in general. So give it up for Caroline Strube, please.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm very bad with microphones, so I will try to do it. Okay, so thanks to the organizer, and I'm really happy to be here with you and share a little bit of my new field. As Rafael said, well, I worked for a while on skeletal muscle, but I also did some neuroscience more on brain. And I have some colleagues here. And as she said, I decided about 5-6 years ago to concentrate on ethics and research integrity. And it's because I think, been confronted to some bad practice, and I think there is a lot to do to promote all the good practice. So today I will tell you about fraud, but the idea is just to try to do a story and show you that fraud has been here for a long time, and there are ways. So what I will show you are real big fraud, but it is just to make it on an historical point of view. And by the end, my talk will join the talk from François Gonon from yesterday. And luckily, most of the time, the kind of fraud we see are not the thing I will show you, but it was just to take it from an historical point of view. So here, as I was telling you, fraud has been dealing with science, or science has been dealing with fraud for a long time. And here we are back in the 2nd century, and Claude Ptolemy, who was a Greek astronomer, and you probably heard about him, because he's at the origin of the theory for the solar system. And he's the one who stated that the Earth is the center of the universe and that the sun revolves around the Earth. And he also made a catalog of 1,022 stars. And in fact, to make this catalog, he borrowed the measurement which had been made 300 years before by Hipparchus. So he was at that time already doing plagiarism. Now we do a big step forward, and another scientist you for sure know the name is Galileo Galilei, and who was an Italian physician, and who developed the theory of dropping bodies. And this guy was so convinced that his theory was correct that he stated the theory before doing the experiments. And when he started the experiment, it was not exactly what he wanted. So he really overstated the importance of some of the results compared to the other ones to establish a theory, which by the end was true, but that was a little too much. Then another one you for sure know is Isaac Newton with the law of gravity. And same thing, he was so convinced of what he wanted to show that he introduced some corrective factors to increase the apparent predictive power of his results. So it's interesting to see that some big fraud, because data falsification and manipulation is classified in the big fraud. It's the three big fraud are fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism, from what you probably know. And so those are big fraud, but the results are still valid. So it's interesting. So those fraud had no big consequences. Now, another one, which is interesting for you biologists, George Mendel. So you remember the poise, I don't know how to say it in English, les petits poilis et les petits poiridés, which we all learned at school. And so who is the father of the genetics and the law of heredity. And when Fisher tried to reproduce the results, he realized that the statistics were too good to be true. And the probability of having the statistics which have been published at the beginning is only 1 over 10,000, which means that the statistics are too good. Again, he was so convinced of the theory that he just did some nicer, it was just making the results look a little bit nicer. But again, here, the law are still valid and it was not too bad. Then Robert Millikan, it's about the same. It's the measurement of the elementary electric charge. And in fact, looking through his raw data, the people realized that between the 175 drops he analyzed, he kept only 58 results, which were the one going in the right direction. The one he expected. So all this, it's not too bad, and the consequences are not important. And that's why mostly we even don't know that this happened. Here, beginning of 20th century, it's a psychologist, Cyril Burt, and you may have heard about him. It's this scientist was working about twins and intelligence. And he stated that he was working on the QI, quotient of intelligence quotient. Sorry, it's difficult for me. I am so used to say it in French and in English. So during his work, he stated that there was an ethnic inequality in intelligence. So at the beginning, he was working on twin, and somehow he was saying that intelligence was part of genetics. And in the same idea, he stated that there was an ethnic inequality. And what is bad is that he was an advisor of the Ministry of Education in Great Britain, and he applied his theory to school selection from a very young age. So here we see that, so that was, the articles was based on data falsification, and same thing, the statistics were too good to be true. And again, he adapted his results to his theory and even invented two collaborators. But we can see here that the consequences are there. And yesterday we were talking about this, about the fact that politics will use science to take decision. And here we can see that those fraud had consequences. And the more we go forward, you'll see the bigger the consequences are. Diederik Stapel, so the one who followed the MOOC probably remember this, the research integrity MOOC. So this guy was a Dutch researcher in social psychology, and he published a paper in Science in 2011 stating that stereotyping and discrimination becomes more prevalent as economic insecurity increases, which is something which is very pleasant. The less money you have, the more stereotype you can have, and the more discrimination you will do. So that was really helping the politics. But so in 10 years, he published 137 papers, and between them, at least 58 contained falsified or invented data to support his hypothesis. And in fact, he had a lot of students, and he was providing data to its students. And so he was designing a survey and saying, well, some colleagues working in another university who could do the survey, and you will just collect the data, and like this you can save time. And but everything was totally invented. And what is a problem also is that the co-author and the reviewer didn't see anything. Some whistleblowers tried to say that there was a problem, they were not heard. And it took about, I don't remember, but it took several years to retract all the bad articles. But you can see that at least 58 articles had falsified or invented data. And up to now, only 31 articles have been retracted, including the one, the Princept one in Science. He has not been punished. And he wrote a book in which he tells about how he got there and how bad it was. And he tried to explain why he did this. And he says, I had become addicted by the rhythm of digging, discovering, testing, publishing, scoring, and applause, however insignificant the discovery were. So he was totally success addicted. And at one point, he just wanted to publish more and more and more. And so he was going in the right direction to be loved. And he was in a cercle infernal. And so that's one thing. And for sure, with here again, some consequences for the society. Another domain, Scott Rubin, who was working on the treatment of post-operative pain. And he published results which were always in favor of the tested drug. And in fact, he was, his research were funded by Pfizer. And he was also the spokesperson for scientific conference dedicated to the promotion of the drugs. And in fact, he never conducted the clinical trials described in at least 21 out of 72 papers published between in about 10, 15 years. And for him, he got a sentence. So he was removed from his position and sentenced 6 months in prison. Do we say prison? French, well, in jail, and 3 years of conditional release, and he had to reimburse the money he had to do its research. So in this case, there was a sanction. And at the bottom, it's a sentence said by by the editor-in-chief of one of the paper which was published, and who basically says that it's a problem when you are financed by a pharmaceutical company. And well, we have been talking about this. So that's one factor. So precedent was Staple, it was really addicted to the glory. And this guy was just under the pressure of the pharmaceutical company. Now, different field. We're not in biology anymore. It's good to see that there are not examples only in biology. So Hendrik Schön, he's a German physicist and employed by Bell Labs. So it's an American company. He succeeded to publish 90 articles in 2 years. And at one point of his career, he was even publishing 1 article every 8 days. And Nature and Science battled for the article. He was just the person. But in all these papers, for sure, he had not the time to do all those experiments. So people found identical curves on several articles, even for the noise. And that's what actually killed him, that the noise was the same. For sure, nobody could reproduce the results. And when the investigation committee asked for the raw data to try to understand what was wrong, he said that he didn't keep it because of the lack of space on its hard disk. I think it's a good detail. So in 2002, the investigation committee revealed that the data were fabricated using mathematical function to generate plausible results for experiments which had never been performed. So it's real data fabrication. And this guy was sentenced. So 36 articles were retracted, which is nothing compared to the number of articles, but still. And especially the biggest one were retracted. He was excluded from the company, deprived of his PhD, which was related on this, and of all the prizes he could have, and banned for 8 years for applying at the equivalent of ANR in Germany. And here in this case, oh, I see that there is weird things in the transformation. Well, the wrongdoers are for sure the frauder, Jan Hendrik Schön, who was hungry for the prestige and wanted to satisfy his employer, but also his employer, Bell Labs, who really wanted results and probably put pressure on its employee to have the right results and more results. Also, the co-author, who were really happy to publish with him and so they were not sentenced, but they have a part of responsibility because they were not checking, they were co-author, and as a co-author, as you know, you are supposed to check what is written. And finally, the publisher, Nature and Science, were really thirsty for a scoop, and this doesn't help. And the reviewing process was probably not good. So we can see here that they are part of responsibility. The responsibility are shared. The last case I will tell you about, which is very, very actual. I like to say that probably if I had made this talk in 1 or 2 or 3 years, we could have another example, very local, but this one is already interesting and very actual. So Andrew Wakefield, he's a British surgeon, and in 98, he published in The Lancet a study describing 12 cases of autistic children who had been vaccinated with MMR vaccine. MMR, it's for the French, c'est rougeole, oreillon, rubéole, for those who, okay, ROR in French. And so that was in 98. Right after this, in Great Britain, there was a decrease in vaccination. 6 years later, a journalist from the Sunday Times demonstrated that there was a conflict of interest because the research was funded by a law firm working for anti-vaccination groups. And another problem, so that was a conflict of interest. And the other thing was that the parents of the autistic children were paid to participate to this study, which is totally unethical. And so at that time, the Lancet refute the allegation, but the co-author disengaged. So they said, no, we are not part of this study anymore, but the Lancet didn't retract the publication. It's important. So 10 years after the publication in the Lancet, the paper is still not retracted. And there is a resurgence of measles cases, including deaths. C'est la rougeole pour ceux qui... So that was a disease. We were not dying anymore, at least in our countries. And the first cases of death from measles appeared in 2009 in Great Britain. 1 year later, there was an investigation. After that, the guy who did a really great job is this journalist, Brian Deere. And so he obtained an investigation, and the results of the investigation showed that the case descriptions did not match the children records. And out of the 12 cases, 3 had sign of autism, but were not diagnosed as autist. That's the first thing. And worse, out of the 12 cases, 5 children were already autistic when they got vaccinated. So we start with 12 cases. First of all, it was just a coincidence. It never showed any correlation and any causal effects. It was just saying there are children who have been vaccinated, and these children are autistic. It's only 12 cases, and it's only a coincidence. And he was trying to put it in a causal effect. And then when you look a little more in detail, you see that 5 cases are definitely not a causal effect because the children were autistic before. So there is only 7 cases left, and out of these 3 are not really autistic. So there is only 4 cases, which could have a link. So that led to the retraction of the article, finally, after 12 years and more than 700 citations. And so 1 year later, the journalist published the full story in BMG. The consequences of all this are that, so the other fact are that since the publication, in parallel, there was more than 20 studies showing no link. Here we are close to what François Gonon was talking about yesterday, is the more cited are the first papers. And then when there are papers where the effect is a little lower or no effect, nobody talks about it because it's not a scoop. So the article has been retracted, and he was banned from practicing medicine in Great Britain. But 2 years later, he left England and went to United States and is now working for anti-vaccine lobbies in Texas. So most of the time you say the career is probably dead. No, he keeps going. Then he made a movie, you may have heard about it, Walks from Cover-Up to Catastrophe, which is an anti-vaccination movie. In 2017, he was invited by Trump. And in the same year, Michel Rivasi, who was a member of the European Parliament, tried to organize the projection of the movie at the European Parliament. And at that time, scientists moved and said, no way. And so that did not happen. But as you know, it is not the end of the story, because we see today all the problem we have with vaccination, especially in Europe and United States. And well, that's one of the cases. And I can tell you, when I first started going to research integrity meetings, I will never forget one of the first meetings where I went was in Paris. And this case was given to illustrate all, because it's there is the conflict of interest, the problem with the editor. There are a lot of points. And so that was given as an example. And at the end of the talk, one guy stood up in the amphitheater and said, "You cannot say this." It was extremely violent. I couldn't believe how violent it was. And those people are extremely violent. So after all those cases, as I said, the goal is not to tell you how to fraud. It's to interpel you and try to understand how can this happen, to avoid it, to prevent it. So there are many factors in the course of researchers' career that can lead to misconduct. And for sure, the motivation will vary around the career, and you can easily understand that your motivation as a student, because there is a, PhD student, will be totally different at the motivation from a senior who is at the end of his career, and the motivation to get a position can be then, when you are a young researcher, the motivation to find money. All this will vary. At the end, you have been a great scientist and you don't want to decline. So the motivation can be really, really various. But among them, as I say, the first one I would say will be the pressure to publish, because the other one, the competition environment, correspond also to the pressure to publish. This thing where we have to publish because it's our work, it's our mission. No, our mission is to improve the knowledge, but we also have to share whatever we are working on. So, and we do it through the conference and the publication. And we know that the best support is the publication, and it's the one which stays. So the pressure to publish is a real problem and can have different reasons. There is pressure, as I was saying, because you want to get a position. First, you want to get your PhD. You have to have one publication, and then you want to get a publication, a position. And then when you have a position, you want to get a grant. And then, so it's at the source of everything. So then the quest for a scoop this is as well from the researcher side and from the editor, the media, as François Gonon was telling about yesterday. The media love big scoops, need for recognition, as I was saying, the fear of decline, precarious situation of young researcher. So there are a lot of academic and scientific factors, and also financial and more. Sam François was telling about this yesterday, but more and more now, they are the fact that the research is not funded by our employer, and the fact that we have to search for money. My husband very often tell me, you are not a scientific researcher, you are a researcher for money. But it's true that our job changes, and this can also be a factor. Now, very quickly, I will go through the consequences, because I think one thing which can help to prevent is to be conscious, because you will at one point be confronted to, I'm not going to say that you will have to fabricate data, and the example I showed you are extreme. And that's why I can show it, because it's extreme. But when your curve is not that good and there is one point over there and you don't know, from time to time, you will be confronted to situations where you will have to make choices. And I think being conscious of the risk you take and of the consequences of the fact of doing a misconduct is also important. So there are consequences for the researcher, and we could say, well, he did fraud, too bad for him, he or her, and but it's good to have this in mind. And also when we are judging and thinking that somebody is actually misconducting, also have keep in mind what will be the consequences if this is true. So loss of academic recognition, for sure, it takes years to be recognized. It takes days, weeks maybe, to fall down. So loss of academic recognition, banishment from the scientific community. Economic consequences. In one of the cases, you have seen that we can make you reimburse part of money. So, and for sure, it won't be your institution who will be paying for you. And also health problem. Now I've been instructing cases for 3 years for the CNRS. I have not seen one case where not only the frauder, but all the people around were in a healthy mental situation after that. It's bad, it's bad. And yeah, it's really bad. So depression, insomnia to depression, insomnia is nothing. It's usually more close to depression and big depression. And for sure, disciplinary and penal sanction. Disciplinary procedures, this can happen for any kind of misconduct. Penal sanction can be applied only in case of plagiarism, because in the French law, I think I wrote it at the bottom. So in France, so as I was saying, data fabrication and falsification are not covered by criminal law. But in contrast, plagiarism can be sanctioned under civil and criminal law if it is recognized as counterfeiting. So plagiarism can. Now, you can have penal sanction if it is demonstrated that your fraud, your misconduct led to significant consequences, for example, for the society. But so it won't be your misconduct for which you will be sanctioned at a penal level. It will be for the consequences. Like if you kill somebody, you are not supposed to kill somebody, but it's because the person is dead. It's not because you pushed on the gun. And the consequences are not only for the researcher. And as I was saying, you can think that the researcher took its responsibility and it's not so bad. But the consequences are also for the scientific community, which is around. It's damaged the perception of science and the scientist, loss of credibility by the society. So those 2 points are very important, and that's what we have been facing during the pandemic is with all the discussion and the loss of credit of our job. And so that's, I think, a very important point and a very bad point. And also on a more fundamental point of view, it makes a background noise which obstructs the access to the knowledge. We know, and this is more for the small, which leads to a lack of reproducibility. Okay. For example, if you produce data which are not reproducible, a lot of other colleagues will try to reproduce your experiment and won't be able to do it. And that's a lack of time, that's a loss of time, of money, and this will slow down all the future research. And so for the society as a whole, with the waste of resources, as I was saying also, spreading of erroneous ideas, misguided political decision-making. I think that's one of the very important points. And we have been confronted to this this past year and a half. And then for sure, the risk for the patient, for the medical science, and the public for physical and chemical science. So, and to finish, I really insist again sur le fait, on fact, that research integrity is really a shared responsibility. And it's generally based on a community. And each of the participants of the research has a part of responsibility and between them. So we talked about the researcher. Around the researcher, there is generally a team and the lab. And at this level, it's important to have a good management and to be aware of human relation. The employer, we saw it, that the employer should not put the pressure on the researcher, but also has a mission of preventing and investigating reports and putting sanction in case of misconduct. And this is now, it has been 3-4 years that all the universities and public organisms have research integrity officer, in French, référent intégrité scientifique. And there is one in each institution, and it's their mission to do preventing action and investigate the cases, really. So that's something which is moving and has been moving these past years in France, and moving in the good way. There are things which are not good, moving in the right way, but this is good. Then there is a part of responsibility for the reviewers for articles, but also reviewers for, because now we ask for money, so the reviewers for the grants also have a part of responsibility, and especially should avoid the conflict of interest. Private or public partner, it's now that it is separated from the employer usually, so they were saying respect for the results, including the negative ones, and avoid financial, social, and political influences. And finally, we also talk about it, the editors who should ensure the quality of the reviewing and resist to the scoop. And again, with this pandemic, we have seen the problem with the editors, the number of articles which were retracted, the number of articles which were published but not reviewed. It's a real responsibility. Thank you. I hope I was clear.
Any questions? Do you want to start?
Yeah, so I have a question regarding, because when there's always a talk, thank you for the talk, by the way, it was very interesting. I always wonder, like, if all these problems that we have with research integrity, wouldn't they be solved if we had like better working conditions and better funding for science? And this is kind of a research integrity problems are just an artifact of the amount of pressure that it's put on researchers and research institutions to produce results, to be competitive in a world that it's not thought to be competitive in the end.
I think I'm not very optimistic. My answer won't be very optimistic. I don't think it would solve everything, because, and that's why when I started this kind of historical thing, it's not the only problem. This increases and exacerbate, I don't know, well, the problems, but it's not the only problem. Definitely not. All the studies looking at the number of cases, one current question is the fraud increasing? Real big fraud? I don't think so. And do we have more cases report? Yes, because a few years ago in France, there was no structure to analyze and instruct the cases. So at the CNRS, the Mission Intégrité Scientifique was created at the end of 2018. It was September 2018. The number of cases is constant. The CNRS was really afraid when the structure was created that it will be tons of cases arriving. So the funny thing is, actually the day after the creation, there was already one case, but there was not such an afflux. And it is mostly constant, but it's only the 3 past years and the system was already the same. But when you look at articles who studied, is there more cases? None of them, it's the limit, but none of them really shows that it's significantly increasing because of the because there is really a double effect. It's the pressure increased, but also the attention we pay to the work of other person increases. And also some platform like Peer and stuff like this appeared, and which reveals more things. And for sure, I would say that most of the time, luckily, the fraud do not lead to bad conclusion, to wrong conclusion, most of the time. And that's the example I showed at the beginning. Is most of the time, it's not a wrong conclusion, but still, it's not good.
It's not that I have another question. I guess it was very similar to yours. I just would like to jump on in the conversation. I feel that with research integrity, it's something recalling me as a climate change. You know, you could make the person learn how to recycle plastic Coca-Cola bottle. You even could teach the person how to use not the plastic jar, but the glass jar. But in the same moment, whose responsibility for the climate change? Individual who buys Coca-Cola once per week, or the global corporation with multiple factories around the world, which is definitely polluting much more. And I feel that there is for sure huge responsibilities for scientists to do not make a fraud and to do not make a big research. But is it really their responsibility for the system where this research is created? Because even on your slides, there was already a name of Science, for example. In 2 cases, Science published these fraud articles. And we, I guess, all know from the beginning of our careers, these big journals are the ones who are pushing you to make the fake research or to, I don't know, compete and so on and so on. And I guess in scientific work, we already know the big names and the big frauds of what is making us doing the bad data and doing a bad research. And I guess even if you do not falsificate, it's still this kind of situation in which we are working now are leading us to choose the topics which will be not really solving the knowledge problem, like to, as you said, to increase the knowledge, but to find something for which I could apply for a new grant. I don't know, that one molecule which will treat all the diseases in the world, or the disease which is now super good in the pharmaceutical world market. I don't know.
Yeah. I definitely, I totally agree. The system and the way the system is changing is increasing the pressure and won't definitely lead to a decrease of the misconduct. I totally agree. But I'm not, what I wanted to say is, even if we had not all this pressure, the problem would not totally disappear. But I totally agree that this increases this. And we are right now analyzing a survey we did, and I'm sure all of you here in the room have been confronted at one point. You have been witness of something wrong going on, and you have been tempted, or you even did something which is not a big thing, something you know is not, it's not a bad practice, but you know it's not the good practice. Do you understand what I mean? And I'm sure all. I even don't ask you because, yeah. And this is because of the system. I totally agree.
Scientific community and the...
Yeah. Well, right now, there is really some work going on with the editors, definitely. And more the editors are part and assist to all the big meetings. There was a meeting, the European Research Integrity meeting at the end of September. And there were some editors. And the editors are really implicated and I think they are conscious. It's moving. It's moving. Yeah, there is a real world. For example, so in France, I didn't take the time to talk about the structures we have, but the Office français de l'intégrité scientifique was created, and there is the COFIS, le Conseil français de l'intégrité scientifique, which is the scientific part of this office. And in the COFIS, there is one journalist and one editor. They changed recently, so I'm not sure. But yeah, the idea is, and almost all the meetings I've been to, they are now editors and journalists.
I have two quick questions. The first one is, in the cases that you instruct, do you see a lot of like huge fraud like you present today, or sometimes is in the cases that you
in the cases sorry.
During the 3 last years, do you see most of the time like huge fraud as you presented today, or sometimes it could be like small arrangement, like changing 1 point on a figure or something like that to get the p-value, stuff like that? And my second question is like, during the cases that you instruct, do you find sometimes only mistakes, like people, I don't know to say in English, like de bonne foi, that make sometimes mistakes?
Yeah, definitely. So I answer to your second question first. Yeah, definitely. Between the case we instruct, sometimes there is just no misconduct. No misconduct. Most of the time it is small misconduct. And I would say one thing, and you probably all know, I've heard about l'affaire Voynet, who was a scientist in plant, who was in Switzerland. And the manipulation was about blots. And years ago, you could cut blots and you didn't need to write in the legend that the blot was not the témoin of this experiment, that you had mixed 2 experiments because it was better to show this. And now you cannot do it anymore, but you could do it. And some people keep doing it. And very often it is this. And very often, so it is something you should not do. And when we go back to the raw data, this doesn't change anything. It is just that the one band works well in one experiment and it was in another experiment, and you put everything together. And that's why actually it is admitted. The only thing is you have to write it in the legend and explain why you do it. And you should be able to show the raw data to say, what I did is just an illustration, and this doesn't change the conclusion. So yeah, most of the case, it is this. But when you have somebody who is doing this once in one paper, okay, we have cases, there are 20 papers. And the first one are from 20 years ago. Okay, 20 years ago, you could do it, you didn't know. They still do it now. At one point you say, well, and the most interesting is, as I'm saying, most of the time, this doesn't change the conclusion. And you are like, why did you do this? And now you are depressed and you don't have any more lab and you may lose your job. Why did you do this? And most of the time, in the cases we instruct, I cannot say it was the majority, there was nothing. Yeah, I think about half of the cases we instruct, there is no misconduct. The proportion of misconduct leading to, the thing is, it takes time to instruct, so most of the cases are not finished yet, but I would say 5% lead to penalty, academical sanction. And actually cases where the conclusion were affected, it's probably this few percent. So no, it's not so bad. We can stay optimistic, but the idea also is talk about this and there is nothing I have to teach you, any of you, but I think having times where we can exchange and say, well, I have been facing this situation. How can I do? And so the idea is more to discuss and know the good way to do. Yes.
Hi, thank you for the talk. So you mentioned somebody inventing data. You mentioned that they could lose their jobs. So now let's try to imagine a researcher in Aix-Marseille University or in CNRS. You know very well these two structures. So what happens after the investigation? And is it true that we can lose the job?
Is it true that you can lose your job? Yes. Following a misconduct from Aix-Marseille University, I don't know because I've never been instructing anything with Aix-Marseille University, and I am not involved in Aix-Marseille University research integrity anymore. And I'm very happy to be like this and not have to deal with this. So I will talk from the CNRS point of view only. At the CNRS, I don't know anybody losing his job following a misconduct. People who lost their job at the CNRS, yes, but it's not only a misconduct, or I would say it has never been such a big misconduct, which could lead. But at the same time, I think the worst was, so Olivier Voinet was mis à pied. Sorry, I don't know how to say it, but it basically means that you don't work, you don't have any more salary, you don't have any more advancement, you are 2 years without a job. So that was for Olivier Voinet from the CNRS, but at that time he was working in Switzerland, so that did not apply to him. And lately, I can talk about this because it's public, it's on the website of the Mission Intégrité Scientifique. We had a case in Institut Pasteur where the researcher was sentenced 6 months it was one year with 6 months if he does something wrong again, he will do. So he has 6 months real and 6 months de sursis.
Conditional?
Sursis.
Conditional, I think.
Yeah, conditional. Yeah. So, and in that case, so you can go on the website and you will have the report. But in that case, it was some blood story. And the results were not changed by the manipulation. And the thing was, there was too many. So it was, yeah, in the same paper too many mistakes at one point. You say, well, it's too much. But most of the paper have just been corrected. They have not all been retracted. So yeah, the CNRS is starting to take sentences. But I can, one point which is important, it is not the responsibility of the research integrity officer to decide on this. The research integrity mission instruct the case, give the conclusion saying there was misconduct. What is important, try to evaluate the importance of the misconduct and determine the responsibilities, because very rarely only one person. The papers are co-signed by several authors. So that's our job stopped there. And then we do a report to the PDG, now it's CNRS, president of the institution, whatever it is. And it's the same process in all institutions. So the research integrity office instruct the case, give the conclusion, makes a reports to the president of the institution, and the president of the institution decides on the sentence. And at the CNRS, it will go through the CAP. Well, there is a process for any kind of misconduct, which can be other than research integrity misconduct.
Okay, we're going to take one last question. Okay.
So concerning the easier cases, so as you said, the majority are not big frauds, and maybe they don't even have very bad consequences, but possibly they are very difficult to spot. So for co-authors, for reviewers, and for editors, maybe they just cannot see. So what's the solution? I have no idea, but don't you think that really favoring and supporting replication studies, wouldn't this help? And I mean really giving money to people doing replication studies, so easy grants for that. Because it's frustrating to do a replication study. You basically, either you waste your time because you replicate, or you have lots of enemies if you don't replicate.
I totally agree. It's the same with what we call the negative results. And one thing I always say is, so there are 2 points. There are the negative results and the expected results. And very often the negative results are the non-expected results. And the positive results are the expected results. And I think in our vocabulary of researcher, we should just get rid of those words. There are no negative results. There are no positive results. There are no expected results. There are a question that you put and you make hypothesis. You make hypothesis and you ask a question. And the question should be formulated so there is no negative and positive results. It's what kind of effect do I expect? And not this drug is this drug having this effect? And it's really a way of formulating our questions which has to be changed. Because the ultimate thing about negative results is now we have a review which are specialized in publishing negative results. It's and it's the same kind of review where you can actually publish if you replicate or not replicate something.
Not very high impact factor, though.
No. It's not the one which will help you to get the next grant. And I agree, it's bad. But I think that still, I think we have a way to change slowly by changing also. If everybody is sensibilized and wants to do the things the right way, we will be all equals. I may be too optimistic.
Just maybe a last question. Thank you for the sensibilization to our PhDs in the room. It's very important, and it started now, about the good practices and integrity in science. My question is dealing with PhD. What will be your advice to a PhD who is facing some, maybe not fraud, but not good practices by his own supervisor? What will be your advice? How can you manage this?
It's a very good question. The thing I said, for any problem you face, any question you have as a PhD, is don't think I am stupid, don't be shy, talk around you. So I used to say the first person you have to talk to is your advisor, but then the team leader, sometimes it's your advisor, then the director of the lab, sometimes it's the best friend of your advisor. Then you have the director of a doctoral school. So usually it's a little further away. And then there is the college doctoral. And I used to work there, and I was saying, when you have a question, come to me. And I was sufficiently aware. I'm not there anymore. One person, you, as a student, also talk to your colleagues, your homologue, your friend PhD student, because he may has a way to go around. But don't be shy, talk. And this will always be good. And I understand, you can say, well, if I reveal something which is going wrong, maybe I won't be able to finish my thesis. Anyway, it will be good for you, because you will be so uncomfortable when you have been witnessing something wrong going on. You won't be, if you feel this is wrong, you won't feel good. So if you think, and maybe it is not wrong, I mean, maybe you misunderstood, but really. And one other person you should be able to talk to is the research integrity officer. So in Aix-Marseille University, there is one person, his name is Pierre-Jean Veillère. But something you have to know is, as soon as there is, for example, a CNRS agent included in what you have been witnessing, you can go to the CNRS research integrity officer. And that can be a good way to go around and not have, and something you have to know is, if you write to the research integrity officer, you can ask to stay anonymous. Sometimes it's complicated, because if it's a problem with your advisor, and if the research integrity officer at one point we come to your advisor and say, well, we have been told that there is something which goes wrong here, and we want to know what is going on. It may not be easy, but you can ask for the anonymous. But the good thing is, you will always find somebody around you can talk to.
I jump on the occasion to mention that within the PhD program, so those are the guys from the PhD program of Neuro School in neuroscience. So first of all, we are trying to support a new initiative, which is the fact that each student should have a parent or marraine de thèse. It would just be another mediating person. Maybe not an expert, but a mediating person. And the comité de suivi individuel, so PhD monitoring committee.
Yeah, the comité de suivi individuel is something very good, but it's true that most of the time, and for doing it. You ask your colleague here and your colleague here. And right now we are instructing cases where it's a problem with at the CNRS with a PhD student who left, but she had 2 committee theses and nothing went out because she just didn't talk. And so, but the parent is very good. One advice I would say, the parent should be chosen not at the beginning of the thesis, probably after 1 year or so, and by the student, by the PhD student. So at least you know that, and this I think is great thing, having somebody you can talk to.
Okay, thank you. We're out of time, but thank you very much, Caroline. It was super interesting.
Thanks to all of you. And it's not here anymore, but you can send me an email if you have problems. I won't answer at the title of anybody from Aix-Marseille University, but just as somebody you saw during a conference, and you can ask for an advice, and I would be really happy to answer if I can.
Thank you very much. Now we're gonna have a few words from Wafa and Anna from the Neuro School to finish to close this last talk. And then we're gonna have the small roundtable session. For the rest. Okay.
On behalf of the World Neuro School Committee, on behalf of all our colleagues,